into business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid-lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings broadcast, and I am your, shall we say, ahead of time, maybe a little short warning, whatever, host, Rick. So tonight, I want to get into a little philosophical discussion, and honestly, I'm not quite sure how philosophical it's going to end up being, but that being said, we'll see what happens. And this is realistically, this is going to be another one of my off the cuff discussions. Not really a lot to do as far as show and tell, but I had the opportunity to think a little bit this week, and it made me realize that there is a huge potential of what's going on in the world today. There's a lot of prophecy that can be tossed around in terms of what is occurring in today's world, the format, the things that are happening, some of the things that we see that are going on now in plain sight. Whereas before it used to be that potentially they were a little more hidden. And so I titled this episode, The Dark is Rising. It's very similar to that children's book titled by the same name. And I can't remember who it's by, but I remember reading it. And that particular book had the ominous feeling of evil rising in the world. I'll get to more of that in just a second. But first, oh, wrong one. And actually, so this one's going to be off the cuff too. So, if you recall, a couple episodes ago, I did discuss the possibility of bringing up and bringing in and possibly doing a video series with regards to the Constitution and being a instructor for the Institute on the Constitution. Well, today I received my materials, and so going through those materials will take me a little bit, but stay tuned because I am going to be putting together some videos with regards to the Constitution, and it's all coming from the Institute on the Constitution. Do yourself a favor. Hey, check this out. So this came in the package, and this is a Constitution of the United States of America. As you can see, it's by the Institute of the Constitution. But check this out, because this is actual leather here. This is a leather binding, and they went ahead and stitched it into the book itself. I mean, this is high quality, and you can purchase this. You don't have to purchase the entire setup, but this is a high quality book talking about the Constitution of the United States. And with the exception of my other book that I've shown you in the past, this one here is just on the Constitution, and it's a good high quality book. You might want to check it out at theamericanview.com. And if you use my code, // Whiskey Musings, all lowercase, all one word, you can get 10% off something like this, a keepsake for passing down generations. That's theamericanview.com // Whiskey Musings for 10% off your order. And as I've mentioned before, I am an affiliate member and soon to be an instructor on the Constitution from theamericanview.com, the Institute on the Constitution, theamericanview.com // Whiskey Musings. It's that particular book. It's really, really nice. It's a good, nice long-term keepsake. So anyway, thank you, Institute on the Constitution, for allowing me to be an affiliate. All right. So our next up is reading from the American Patriots Almanac, of course. And that brings us to this segment. On this day in American history. All right, so on this day in American history, today is April 9th, and we are going to be talking about Americans all. So the Civil War came to an end for all practical purposes in April of 1865, when Robert E. Lee's starving, exhausted Confederate Army found itself hemmed in by Union forces in Virginia. On April 9th, Lee met with General Ulysses S. Grant in a farmhouse at Appomattox Courthouse to offer his surrender. Grant's terms were generous. The Southern soldiers were to be pardoned and could go home with their private property, including their horses, which could be used for a late spring planting. Officers could keep their sidearms, and Lee's hungry troops would receive Union rations. This will have the best possible effect upon the men, Lee observed quietly. 3 days later, the formal surrender took place as Confederate troops marched forward to stack their weapons and lay down their flags. The Union officer in charge of the ceremony was Joshua Chamberlain, a hero of Gettysburg. Leading the Southerners was General John B. Gordon, who had been wounded many times in combat. Chamberlain watched Gordon approaching. As he later described it, quote, "The general was riding in advance of his troops. His chin drooped to his breast, downhardened, and depicted in appearance almost beyond description." Dejected in appearance almost beyond description. Something stirred in Chamberlain's breast. He gave an order. A bugle call sounded, and his men came to attention with their rifles on their shoulders. It was a salute of honor. General Gordon looked up in surprise. Recognizing the gesture, he wheeled his horse, dipped his sword, and ordered his own men to return the salute. Lee's defeated veterans stepped forward with heads held high and eyes level, honor saluting honor. Then it was over. The Union had been tested and had survived. With the salute of soldierly respect, the nation's wounds began to heal. Both sides faced a new beginning as Americans all. And that is today's On This Day in American History. You know, it's sort of interesting that we talk about this or that this particular subject came up, because of the fact that, ever increasingly we're dealing with, in terms of our public communications, we're seeing more and more of a divide in our country. We're seeing more and more of a separation. It used to be back in, not even like 30, 40 years ago, not even that far back. Let's even go 20 years ago. Republicans and Democrats in particular understood one thing, and that was that America was a great country, that America was a place to aspire to, that it was a place that people risked their lives to come here, whether legally or illegally, that people came here because they felt that America was the last bastion of freedom and the beacon of hope for all the world to see. And unfortunately, over these last 20 years, it has broken down even farther. And now we're looking at essentially an attack on just about every facet of our society. We used to rally around things like protecting children. We used to rally around things like understanding the flag and what it means. And I mean, yes, we had our issues in the past in terms of things like Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and the return of the soldiers there. And we had a lot of questioning even the Korean War. But all in all, deep down, both Democrats and Republicans essentially were Americans, all. We got together under the same standard. And by standard, I mean flag. We all saluted it. We all stood up. There wasn't any kneeling. There wasn't any disrespect of the flag. There weren't riots. There wasn't anything that could be construed as being negative against the country. Yes, we had our differences. And yes, we had our issues with the government and how things were being run by whichever party happened to be in power at the time. But the fact of the matter is that we all at least agreed in terms of the idea of America, the history of America, the ideal of the American dream, and the focus of where we needed to go in order to attain that dream. And now I see a huge darkness has fallen across this great country. We also knew that things such as integrity, honor, ethics, loyalty, those were words that had meaning. They provided us with, let's say, a framework with which to work with. You know, the old time was that you could go in and to somebody's enter a contract or come to an agreement in terms of work, and the handshake between two people was enough to seal the deal. And then all of a sudden we got into things like contracts. And now breaking contracts brought us to court. And we'd start going into court adversarially. We would get into situations where, you know, now people were starting to cheat other people. We started getting suspicious of others, especially here in America. We'd be suspicious. Crime has started to go up, even furthermore than what it used to be. We used to have our doors unlocked. Now, if you don't lock your door, then the potential of somebody coming in, rather than it being a friend, is more likely to be a foe. We could trust leaving things on the street like bicycles. I mean, as a kid, I used to go around and we'd drop our bikes and we'd go off and play and come back, and sure enough, our bikes would be there. Not today. We also had no worry. My parents would let us out as kids, and we'd go and we'd run and frolic, and the rule was come back when you're either hungry or the lights come on in the summertime for the street lamps. We don't have that today. It used to be that you could walk down the street without being worried of being accosted by someone, or even better yet, being accused of taking risks that someone else didn't want to take because of wearing or not wearing a mask. It used to be that we didn't have to worry about our kids going off to schools because schools were safe havens, places where our children could get dropped off and they would be safe throughout the day for that time period. All of that is gone. All of that is gone today. And realistically, if you look at everything that has happened over the course of the last 40 years, roughly, you're starting to realize that there's been a buildup, a brewing, you might say. Today's activities, in terms of the division that's going on, at its very heart, looks like a division between Republicans and Democrats. But I say it goes even deeper than that. I say it's even more primordial, that it's more basic. I say we are looking at the buildup and potentially the culmination of good versus evil. Now, hear me out. I know some people might have some problems and they might think, oh, you're getting into this, too much of this, maybe this religious stuff. And although I don't usually discuss it, I am going to bring it up tonight because realistically, when we talk about things like integrity, honor, ethics, morals, standards, there has to be a way to determine where those values come from. And a lot of people think it has to deal with society, that it's a societal value, and that what we're seeing here is we're actually seeing the breakdown of societal values. But in reality, what I think I'm seeing, and again, if you look back even on the 50s, just to give you an example, there was a core family unit. There was a core understanding. And you would see groups of people, while they may not worship the same religion, Sunday mornings was always a thing to, understand that shops were closed. Typically people had the day off so they could go to church. It was a day that was designed by society to be a day to separate and focus on family values, to focus on the family and getting together. We would have Sunday dinners, and Americans would all get together and they would enjoy Sundays. There'd be the potluck at church, or maybe, a family gathering, or possibly even like neighborhood barbecues. We would all get together and focus on each other and the development of society as a whole. And the reason for that is because we all seem to share a very similar and basic foundation. And all of that has started to be ripped away, at least as far as what you can see in the mainstream media. Because the mainstream media has decided to throw in with the growing evil. And yes, I'm going to call it growing evil. Because how is it that you can have a society that's built on values, that's built on truth and justice in the American way, to steal a line from Superman, but to take those values and throw them all away when it comes to things like protecting our kids? See, sex education in the classroom is a really hot button item right now. And the reason being is because parents have finally woken up and gone, you know what? This is not right. For you teachers, strangers really, to be instructing on your orientation or whatever within the classroom to young prepubescent children. And then you have the whole idea of the destruction of our history. And you start to tear that down and take that apart. I'm reading 1984 all over again, and I've got to tell you, the dystopian society that at least the first half of the book describes it's amazing in terms of the similarities for the direction of where this country is headed. And a lot of people have called that out, as well as Animal Farm, in terms of the destruction of the history of the past. And in the book so far, and again, I haven't completed it yet. I did read it back in high school, but I'm rereading it now. But in the book, there is the main character works at a place that actively goes and rewrites history based on whatever is happening in the present. And the key here is just to understand that you can't look back at history to see what has gone before, because if you lose yourself in that history, if they're wrong, it breaks down the illusion of the leaders of the present. And this, honestly, is kind of where our country is sort of heading, because we've decided to forego things like marriage. Divorce rate is really, really high. We throw things out there like making sure that we as individuals, rather than the collective group, we are focused on, rather than understanding that there are things that are greater than ourselves that we should be working for. We have the chasing after the dollar in order to survive, in order to make a living. But it's for the accumulation of things that we keep going after, rather than understanding that there is something bigger than ourselves. and that we should be looking toward, whether it's God or understanding that we are only part of a bigger wheel. However that works out. We have evils going on, such as Buddy just pointed out, with disposable babies. Just this week, there was an article that talked about 5 bodies were found in D.C. Probably, although we don't know, but allegedly could have been aborted illegally. And we sit here and we talk about things like values and ethics and morals and standards. But now we have so many conspiracy theories, quote unquote, that have been coming true. And our leadership is completely starting to crumble. And the corruption is being brought forth and being brought forward in such a way that it is no longer being hidden. There is not even an ounce of trying to cover up anything. It's all coming out now. The battle that's waging right now, and some people would say it's from the Democrats and Republicans. I go farther than that. I go down to its most basic level. Again, this is good versus evil. The dark itself is rising. It's no longer hiding anymore. And we, as a good and honest people, all of my listeners out there, I'm talking to you specifically. We need to gain our energy to stand up. It doesn't have to be a physical fight, but making sure that we hold true to our values. We don't sit silent when we see things going on that are wrong. We try and get involved locally, especially. The dark itself is rising, and it's getting stronger by the minute. We just had Ketanji Jackson Brown, a known supporter of pedophilia. She has been shown by Ted Cruz to be extremely light on what should be considered some of the most heinous crimes against children. They let it go. The Democrats in particular, and some Republicans, let it go. And they went ahead and voted her onto the Supreme Court. We have Jeffrey Epstein, who allegedly took his own life in his cell. Still don't know if that's true or not. But his cohort, Ghislaine Maxwell, on trial, found guilty. We literally at this point have zero knowledge of who the people were that she serviced, the clientele. We have zero knowledge of this. Back when I was a kid, if there was a pedophile, believe me, they were ostracized. They were torn apart. They were taken to court and hopefully never seen from again. Our society has broken down to allow these kinds of things to happen. You look at the Hunter Biden laptop and all of the things that he's been doing. There's some horrific pictures on this laptop that are allegedly of him with underage girls. And I say allegedly because none of it has come to 100% light. There is no outrage. The mainstream media have buried it. Big tech has buried it. All of these things have come together to demonstrate that the dark is rising. We look at things like the war over in Ukraine, and honestly, whether or not it's happening the way that it's being said, there's some horrific stories coming out of there. We have a president who literally is walking around after he's been, at a press conference. Nobody wants to talk to him. And you wonder, why is this person in charge of America? His entire career was built on plagiarism and lies, proven, not questionable, but proven to be this way. Back when the mainstream media actually did their job appropriately. And yet, for some reason, they've been allowed to move on. We've held our politicians up to a higher standard. That's one of the things that we do. We think that our politicians should be held to a higher standard because they have a higher stance of ethics and morals and values. All of that has gone to the wayside. We allow underhanded dealings. If you look at any one of them that have gone into politics, they shouldn't have gone into politics and gotten rich, but they do. And you have to ask yourself the question, how can that happen? Well, the only obvious answer is that they're gaining under dealings under the table. So you have to ask yourself, where is our values? Where is our standards? Why have we turned a blind eye to these things? The reality is, the dark is rising. And it's gaining strength. We've allowed the takeover of corporations and companies that cater to children. We've allowed our society to bend over backwards for the small minority, thinking, it's okay. It's just we're just going to concede this small little bit. And every single time that we do, we concede just that much more, because the next time it comes around, it's like, hey, you did it for that. Why can't you do it for this? And we concede a little bit more and a little more and a little more. And now we end up where we are today. That's how the dark works. That's how, honestly, the devil and Satan work. And I know this kind of sounds a little bit like a preachy setup, but the reality is that evil exists all around us. There is a positive and a negative to everything. It doesn't matter. But in order for good to win, we have to get together and we have to actually stand up for the little things. Think of it as broken windows policing. And Dan Bongino brings this up, and this was something that Rudy Giuliani did in New York. And this was, prior to 9/11 and stuff. But what he did was he basically said, look, the people who are doing the heinous things, like the murders and the rapes and the armed burglaries and stuff, they are the ones who are also doing the little things like jumping turnstiles and breaking windows and tagging. And so what he did was he implemented a policy where they went after the little stuff. And sure enough, through statistics, they found that if they went after the little stuff and they got the guy doing the little stuff, all of a sudden the big stuff started to go away as well. And the reason being is because that was the same person. The person doing the little things was the same one doing the big things. And it's being shown even today. It's being shown because of cities that are allowing people to get off on what would normally be simple crimes. They're seeing spikes in all of these other things because it's human nature, honestly, to, if you give an inch, to take a mile. That's the dark side of our human nature. And that dark is on the rise right now. We need to get to the point where we can get rid of the dark. We need to make sure that we can pin the dark back into its proper corner. We need to stand up and start delivering for good in this world. And I know it's tough. Believe me, I understand it's tough. People like Dan Bongino talk about creating a parallel economy. They talk about, boycotts are the tool of evil, but the boycotts can also be a tool for good as well. In the case of Disney, or any other company for that matter, that supports these leftist ideologues, any of them, do your part. Don't support them. Vote and talk with your money. If you have Disney stock, sell Disney stock. If you had a plan to go to Disney, boycott it. Don't go. I heard a report that over 350,000 subscriptions have been canceled for Disney and Disney Plus just over the course of the last week. Now, I don't know if that report is true, but if it is, that is an awesome trend. That is a great trend. Keep it up. Because even though the dark is rising, we are actually winning in certain cases. And when it comes to our voting in 2022, honestly, I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat. If they're an incumbent, they should not get your vote. There are only very few exceptions right now of those who should. And to be honest with you, I would be looking at places like Governor Ron DeSantis as an example of who we need to be supporting moving forward. Ted Cruz is another one, although he's played both sides of the fence at times, but he's really kind of stepped out. But people like Mitch McConnell, who's that? McCarthy, I think. Some of the other rhinos, they all need to go, especially people like Mitt Romney or Lisa Murkowski. All of those people who decided to vote on a person for the Supreme Court who literally could not define the word woman. And if you look at the attack on women and the attack on women's rights, where's the women's suffrage? Where are all these people who fought to have women become equals in the workplace? Where are all these people who have stood up and said, you know what? Women can do just as good as men can. Where are all they? It's like they're completely silent. And again, I believe it's because the dark is rising. The dark has put itself on full display as of right now. And if you're a believer in the Bible, there are certain things that are happening right now that tend to fall into what's considered the end of days. We need to try our best and fight to stop this rising of the dark. We need to focus our efforts. We need to support the businesses and the shows and the Daily Wire is coming out with a kids version, kid-friendly version of programming. They're going to need help. And while I'm not affiliated with them and I get no monetary value out of this, I support them already. I have a subscription, but I encourage you to check out what they're doing. These are the good people of the world, the ones that are making a difference toward the fight against the darkness. We need to band together. We need to get together. We need to stop with the idea that these people are going to be able to be negotiated with. No further negotiations. Because every time we negotiate with them, they take more. The dark is rising. And the only way to confront it is for us to stand solid and stand our ground. I finally realized this is the channel. This is a channel, a small little space within the internet universe where I will do my best to make sure that I speak the truth, that I bring honor, integrity, ethics, morals, standards to the web. That's my mission. Buddy brought up a good point here in terms of a quote. He's like, rage against the dying of the light. And that's correct. That, if I remember right, that's a Bob Dylan poem, if I remember correctly. But the key here is we need to stand. We need to make a united front. And we can't do that if people don't want to show up. It's scary to make a stand. It's scary to believe me. I think of it all the time about some of the things like my family getting in trouble because of some of the things that I do. But inside my heart of hearts, I need to stand up. I can't sit and be silent anymore and allow this evil to come out. Oh, Buddy corrected me. It's Dylan Thomas. You're right. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to stop backing down to these people. We need to start taking command, not in a mean way, but in an assertive way, in a way that sets the standard, that basically says, no more. You've done enough. No more. And it's been going on for generations, so I totally see that it's going to take generations to undo. But we need to stand up for morals and standards. We need to stand up if you have religious beliefs. We need to stand up for the idea of what America is and the good, bright, and shiny star that she is to everyone else in the world. We need to start focusing on what is right, what is good, and what is positive in our environment. We've allowed these people to whittle away at our society for way too long in the interest of being the better of the two, the magnanimous, the more tolerant of the group. Conservatives have been stepping back on a consistent basis. And we've been like, you know what? That's not really our deal. You know what? That's not really for us. And all that is done is given the opponents the step forward, the next step, and the next step. Even if it's just a half step, they'll take it. And then they'll ask for the next one. And every single time that we give up a little bit of ground over and over and over again, all of a sudden we're looking at a large piece of ground that's been taken. We need to stop. The dark is rising, and it's time for us to stand up to it. It's time for us to make known that we are not going to capitulate anymore. And to be completely honest, things like going along with stuff like the redefinition of words, marriage, what is a man, what is a woman, for us to go through and allow for that to happen, the redefinition of language. 1984 had the same thing. They called it newspeak. And then you had old speak and newspeak and all of these different, they were like, why would we have 5 different ways to describe the same thing when we can use one word and, this is just so much more efficient. And somebody might sit there and say, you know what, you're right, it is more efficient. That does kind of make sense. But as the changes occur and as things move forward, you start to realize that they're taking away more than just the language. They're taking away more than just our historical figures. They're taking away more than just our morals and our values. They're looking for a consolidation of not only control, but to make us and turn us into essentially robots. And this sounds very doomsdayish, but the truth is that the more we give up our individual freedoms and we don't stop them and say no more, the more we allow them to erode what makes America the great thing that it is. I saw a clip of an interview, and it's really kind of odd because the leftists that are in the control right now, that are running our country, are so out of touch with what reality is. They have this elitist mentality that they know better than anyone else of what is good for that individual person. And the funny thing was, it was an interview between Pete Buttigieg and this, I think it was a podcaster or something like that. But the podcaster happened to be black. And he said, you know, black people feel like the Democrat Party have promised a whole bunch, but have never delivered. And Pete Buttigieg is looking and he's like, really? Like, he's shocked at this. He's surprised at this. And the fact of the matter is that they know they haven't delivered. They understand it. They're not completely stupid. They wouldn't be getting to where they were if they were completely stupid. But the fact is that they, like Dan Bongino keeps saying, they think we're stupid. The mask is off now. We've seen it. They are working to try and destroy every single piece of our government, our society, and our standards. The mask is off. And we now, unfortunately, need to stand up and come back to the fight. We can't just sit here and take it anymore. We cannot sit here and allow them to do everything that they're doing. The fact of the matter is, if you cannot define what a woman is, and you cannot understand that there are only two genders, that all of the others are counterfeits, I'm sorry. But that is just a fact, not only a fact of our society, and maybe of biblical society, but it's pretty much a fact in just about every other facet of this world. If you look at almost every other species, there is not one singular species that actually has something other than male and female. Now, there are some idiosyncrasies. There are some things like frogs, and some species of frogs, that if you end up in an all-male society, some of them will transfer over to female. But that's the thing. They transfer from male to female. And I don't care what anybody says. We have not had one medical procedure that has been able to take a man and put a uterus and ovaries into that man and make them get pregnant. It has not happened. Ever. Now, they can change the outside parts. Fine. But statistically speaking, if you look at that, more people who have done transitions either want to retransition back or regret their decision entirely. And what is the point in forcing this kind of mentality onto children? We look at children, and anyone under the age of 18 as not being able to make intelligent decisions because they are not considered adults. And scientifically speaking, the part of the brain, the frontal lobe of the brain that is responsible for making rational decisions, doesn't fully develop until their mid-20s at the average. For some people, it's more time, and for some, it's less. So understanding those scientific facts, why are we even talking about the possibility that these people could go behind their parents' back and go and do some kind of gender transition? This is evil that's rising. This is the dark that is rising in our society today. And the fact that it's such a small percentage that is trying to bend to the will, or trying to bend the will of the general populace. If you look at the Florida law, which was falsely accused of being the Don't Say Gay bill, but is actually the Parental Rights and Education bill. If you look at that bill and people actually read what was in the bill and understood what that bill actually meant, they are overwhelmingly supportive of it, regardless of whether it was Democrat or Republican. We've got to stop thinking of ourselves that way. We have to get back to the common precept that there is good in this world and there is evil in this world. There are things that are good, right, and just, and there are the others. There are people who are looking to destroy America, and we need to stand up to them. We cannot kowtow to them anymore. We cannot sit here and capitulate to them anymore. The dark is rising, and it's time for us to meet it and ultimately defeat it. I know I'm a little short, but that's my final Whiskey Musings thought for the evening. Do me a favor, if you like this program, go ahead and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you aren't a Rumbler, although I would prefer seeing my Rumble count going up, if you're not a Rumbler, then, go ahead and do it on YouTube. But keep in mind that, even Google and the alphabet soup, they're fighting against the good side. People like myself, who are just trying to bring the truth to the world. Yeah, so do me a favor and subscribe. Hey, if you like the show and support it, do me also a favor. Do me a favor. Spread the word. Talk to others about it. And that is my show for tonight. Thank you very much for joining. We'll see you next time on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.